Every year, hundreds of thousands of Americans suffer a sudden cardiac arrest, and a lot of them won't get the life-saving treatment they need because no one around them knew CPR when it mattered most. I'm Communications Director Audrey Barnes, and this edition of Laurel Community Spotlight is all about saving lives. This is National CPR and AED Awareness Week. Joining me now to talk about that is Jeremy Gruber, one of the owners of Rescue One Training in Gaithersburg. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
We thought the mobile command unit would make a great backdrop for this segment since it's all about saving lives, right?
Absolutely. Great for having the ability to see what it's all about and showing the mobile command unit, because you never know when it's going to be on an incident, and it will have an AED inside, and it could be the one that saves somebody at an incident.
Now, the city of Laurel received a really special gift from Rescue One in February. You gave us 100 AEDs, or automated external defibrillators, which we know can deliver an electric shock to someone who's had a sudden cardiac arrest. Why did you decide to make such a generous donation?
I thought it would be great because it's a community that's the right size, and it's a community that public access to fibrillation program makes sense in. And I knew some people in Laurel, and I discussed it with them. They thought it was a great idea, and they bought into the idea to support it. So having the support from the city, from the mayor, from the police chief, it made sense to work with the city of Laurel and make that donation and make this a safer area. Plus, I'm in this area a lot, so you never know, it could help myself.
And it's definitely something that has really increased your chances of surviving, because those AEDs are now going into all of our police cars, and they're in our city buildings, and even our code enforcement officers have them in their vehicles. And that's what you need. They need to be out there, right?
Yeah, that is correct. AEDs need to be where people are when things happen. It's no different than a smoke detector in your house in the middle of the night if you have a fire and the smoke detector goes off and saves your life because it alerts you before the fire gets too big, or the airbag in your car, or the life preserver on your boat. It's a safety device that really isn't needed until it's needed. So having a defibrillator readily available in the public makes all the sense in the world, and having them spread out through the code enforcement in the police cars just makes it very quick to get a device on somebody who needs it.
Jeremy, before we talk about AEDs and how critical they are, let's talk about CPR, because that's something everyone needs to know.
There's no question about it. CPR is very important. By knowing how to do CPR and recognizing the signs and symptoms of when someone is having a problem, and then by providing CPR for somebody, you're allowing precious minutes to get a defibrillator on somebody. So it really buys time to get a defibrillator. Occasionally CPR can fix the problem, but more than likely an AED is going to be needed to fix the electrical problem. But CPR buys time because it circulates the blood and keeps the body fresh for when an AED arrives, and there's still electrical activity to correct when an AED arrives, and that's what CPR does for people.
Why is it so intimidating, CPR?
You know, it is intimidating to some people because they don't really want to put their hands on someone they don't know, or get involved and get that intimate with somebody and potentially having to do rescue breathing or compression only CPR, because they have to get involved in pushing on someone's chest and they're not sure if they're going to hurt them. But you really can't make someone who doesn't have a pulse and isn't breathing any worse, because they're already dead. So you can really only help them. So by pushing hard and pushing fast, CPR makes all the difference and can buy that time that's needed to fix that person's problem.
Well, I see you have a table full of things that you can demonstrate for us. Is there some basic things you can tell us about doing CPR? I see you have a dummy you can demonstrate.
Sure, absolutely. The first thing you want to do is assess the situation so no one's going to get themselves into a problem and become a victim. So make sure it's safe to get involved. And then once we do get involved, you can assess your victim by tapping them and shouting, "Are you okay?" and see if they can respond. If there is no response, we want to look at the chest and listen with their ear to see if there's any air exchange. And for lay rescuers, if there is no air exchange, we're going to begin CPR. So basically, you're going to take one hand, place it in the center of the chest, the other hand on top, and then you're going to push down approximately 2 inches in depth, going at the rate of about 100 a minute.
So you really have to be vigorous with it. It's not something to play around with. You have to get in there.
Absolutely. You need to push on the chest and be able to push hard enough to get the chest to go 2 inches in depth. Normally, obviously, we'd be doing this on the ground, so you'd be on your knees, your shoulders would be over top of the victim, your arms would be locked, and you'd be pushing straight down at the rate of about 100 per minute. And you can sing a song like "Staying Alive," if you know that song, or row your boat, because those are all on the beat of 100 beats per minute, and that'll keep your mind in a place where it can count how often you need to be compressing and keep you in the rhythm. You don't need to give breaths if you don't feel you can, because compression only CPR actually allows for ventilation to occur and allows for circulation to occur. So that everything is taking place, and if someone were choking, by pushing on the chest, you're going to potentially relieve the obstructed object also. So hands only CPR is found to be very effective.
And that seems to be the trend. I've saw a lot of things online today where they're demonstrating hands-only training for CPR.
Right, it's very simple to teach somebody hands-only CPR. You can teach somebody hands-only CPR in 10 to 15 minutes, so you're taking a very small amount of time to have a very impact on what someone's outcome would be by learning what to do and getting involved and not letting somebody sit there without having anything done to them. So it's very important.
And we should remind our viewers that this is something you definitely, while you're doing this, someone needs to try to call 911 and get some emergency crews rolling towards the victim, correct?
Without question. Obviously, it's dependent on where you are. If you have cell phone availability or landline availability, call as quickly as possible. But if you know CPR, as soon as you can, start CPR. And if you know there's a defibrillator in the area, go ahead and have somebody get it, or you yourself get it, depending on where it's located. You have to use a lot of, good judgment in the time of that emergency to try and make the best decisions possible for that person.
So let's talk about the AEDs. These are going in the trunks of our police cruisers and our city buildings, and the officers that I've talked with say they are so user-friendly. What makes this a good AED?
Most of the AEDs on the market are very user-friendly. I chose this one because of its durability and the ability to be in the weather. It has a very, what we call, high IP rating, ingress protection, so you can have it in rain and water and things of that nature, and the cold and things won't affect it that much. So it was a good device to put in police cars, and it's a good, easy device for people to use because it talks you right through it. I'm going to turn it on and let you listen to how it walks you through what needs to be done.
Child patient, call for medical assistance. Remove clothing from patient's chest to expose bare skin. Pull green tab to remove pads. Peel pads from liner.
Down.
Apply pads to patient's bare chest, as shown in picture. Press pads firmly to patient's bare skin.
I see what you mean.
Tab to remove pads.
And this is for our child patient. We'll do a front and back.
Peel pads from liner.
Now this device won't go any further because this is a real AED with real pads, and this is not a real patient. But
As shown in picture.
on the next defibrillator I brought, we'll demonstrate very quickly, I have a simulator that it will simulate going through a full rescue. This is a semi-automatic device, so once it determined a shock was needed, you'd need to push the shock button. This is a fully automatic device where once a shock is determined, it will shock on its own. So depending on what device AED you come across, it could shock on its own, or you'd have to push a button. So you need to pay attention to what the AED is telling you. They're very intuitive, but you have to listen and figure out whether you need to push the button or it's going to shock on its own.
How do you know when you need to move from doing CPR to using an AED on someone?
Anytime somebody is unconscious and unresponsive and it doesn't appear that they're breathing, you should go ahead and use an AED, and the machine will determine whether a shock is necessary or not. All the information that the machine will be able to figure out is once putting the pads on the patient's chest, on the right chest above the right breast, and on the left chest below the left breast to the side. Once those pads are attached, it's now looking at the computer from inside the AED, is checking and seeing the electrical activity. And once it determines the electrical activity is appropriate to be shocked, it'll charge up and allow the machine to be shocked. If it doesn't see a shockable rhythm, it will then tell you to go ahead and do CPR. Whether the person has a correct rhythm or no rhythm at all, it assumes that you've put this AED on somebody because they are unconscious, unresponsive, and in the need of CPR.
I know with the city of Laurel, our employees are getting 6 hours of training in CPR and AED.
Sure. As a public access defibrillator program is in place, you don't necessarily have to have training because the AEDs will never shock anybody that don't need to be shocked. It only shocks somebody when it recognizes the arrhythmia that needs to be corrected. So by having the training, though, it makes it so much easier because you do do learn how to do CPR, how to open an airway, how to relieve an obstructed object if someone was choking, and how to perform in the use of an AED, placing the pads very simply and getting them in the right spot. So it's great to have the training, but you don't necessarily have to have the training in an emergency if there's no one else around who's had the training, because the AED does everything for you in telling you what to do.
And you were saying that this one's even...
So this is even another type of device that's even more foolproof in the sense that once the pads are placed, it will actually shock the patient for you without you having to push the button to deliver the therapy.
Tear open package and remove pads.
So it tells you what to do. We take and tear open the package.
Tear open package and remove pads. Peel one pad from plastic liner.
So these are married together. They're always assessing each other.
From plastic liner.
Once we peel the pad off,
place one pad on bare upper chest.
we place it on the bare upper chest.
Place one pad on bare upper chest.
And we'll seal the
Peel second pad and place on bare lower chest.
Place it on the bare
shown.
lower chest. Now, once again, since this
Peel
patient
second
is
pad
not
and place on
a
bare
live
lower
victim,
chest
I'm going to put a
as shown.
simulator in place to make it look as if there
Peel
was a
second pad and
cardiac
place
arrest
on bare
in
lower
progress.
chest.
So I've turned my simulator on, and it's assessing
Do
the
not
victim.
touch patient. Analyzing rhythm.
In its assessment, it's going to determine a shock is necessary, and this is what you're going to hear.
Do not touch patient. Analyzing rhythm. Do not touch patient. Shock advised. Charging. Stand clear. Shock will be delivered in 3, 2, 1. Shock delivered. It is now safe to touch the patient. Start CPR. Give 30 compressions. Then give 2 breaths.
That really is user-friendly. That tells you everything. Really could erase the fear factor in an emergency situation.
Absolutely. There's also a printout here. Everything that was said is written, so if someone couldn't hear in a loud environment, they could read what it was saying, or if someone had a hearing impairment, they could read what it was saying. So it's very intuitive to be able to interact with somebody that's helping somebody else and walk you through the steps. Other devices, like the Zoll device, will actually even give you feedback when you're doing CPR to tell you whether you're pushing hard enough or pushing fast enough. So they get very, very intuitive to a little less intuitive, but they're all good. They all provide what we call a biphasic shock, and that's sending electricity across the heart and back again, basically taking the chaos that's occurring in the heart and stop and resetting it, like rebooting a computer, resetting and going back into a normal organized electrical activity that allows for blood to continue to flow through the body and go back to its normal position.
I guess just to wrap things up, what do you think is the take-home message? You have a national week devoted to this type of life-saving training. What is the message you want the viewers of Laurel Community Spotlight to know?
I think preparedness is the key to success. I think in the future you and I are going to be working together to provide CPR training for the citizens of Laurel. So there's no reason that anybody in Laurel can't come out and take a CPR training class and learn what to do in the event of emergency, whether it's a family member, a child, an infant, or an adult, or if they're a place of work. So I think the message is take a few minutes and learn what to do, and then know where your closest AED is to your home, and be aware of them at work, and make sure that you're prepared to respond when something happens.
Jeremy, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in for this edition of Laurel Community Spotlight. Save a life. Go out and get trained. Thanks for watching, everybody.